Hello and welcome back to another Archaeo-Scope. This series is kind of like an inverted questions of doom, where rather than you sending me questions to try and answer, I attempt to get your collective wisdom gathered into one place by putting a question onto a video and asking you guys to respond to it. And hopefully by actually together considering the question at hand and responding, we come up with an answer which individually we might not have thought of. So hopefully this will be quite an interesting topic for discussion. Today's Archaeo-Scope is actually inspired by our weekend visit to Vinderlander. You may recall on Friday I said that Mrs. Soup and I were off to Vinderlander to have a lovely afternoon over the weekend. Vinderlander is an excellent site. It's a Roman fort. Actually 9 Roman forts on the same spot along the route of Hadrian's Wall. It continues to be a very fruitful archaeological site. Remarkable finds being made every year, and actually just a couple of days ago they found, for example, right at the beginning of the digging season, they found the top of a rather elegant signet ring from a Roman gentleman. So I think that it's an interesting site. It's a complicated site. It's got the vicus and the fort, and Mrs. Soup and I attempt to get there at least once a year just to keep up to date with what's going on site. In fact, one day I would love to go back and possibly film a site visit for you guys, but we'll see, especially after this video. You see, today's Archaeo-Scope has been inspired by our visit, not because the visit was great, which it was a wonderful visit. Also, it's worthwhile just very briefly mentioning the legacy of the Burleys. Successive generations of academics who have devoted their careers to studying Vinderlander. In fact, actually, there's a room at my university called the Burley Room. Anyway, so it's a great site. And despite a great visit, what happened over the weekend has really stuck with me, because I think it raises an interesting question for archaeology and archaeologists, and hopefully you'll enjoy discussing it. And that is one of access. You see, we weren't visiting the site on our own. Mrs. Soup and I went with a good friend of ours who has mobility issues. She's not physically disabled, as it were, but she has an astounding chronic condition which limits her mobility in terms of breathing, for example. So she can't really walk long distances, and therefore she has a wheelchair, an electric wheelchair, which she uses to get around. And the Vinderlander is excellent in many respects in terms of it is almost fully wheelchair accessible. I mean, we had a wonderful time getting in. That was fine. Getting onto the fort was a little bit of a challenge, but then you wouldn't want them to tear up the place just to have a wheelchair accessible path. Frankly, it was part of the fun as well. All three of us had quite a good time getting to the middle to see what was there. And then actually, after we'd seen the vicus and the fort, we went down this rather intimidatingly steep but nonetheless wheelchair accessible path down into a valley which has a brook, and if anyone's visited you'll know what I mean. Across a bridge, then up to the museum, which is at the other side of that valley. And again, we had a wonderful time in the museum. A great visit, lots of interesting finds. It's always a pleasure. Basically, it's always a pleasure. But on leaving, something rather unfortunate happened. Now, obviously, our friend needs a certain amount of space to leave the site, and on leaving, we said to the person in the museum, "Oh, ta-ra! It was wonderful. We had a wonderful visit. We're just going to head up and leave now." And they said, "Yeah, great, okay. Oh, it's raining out there. Be careful, because the path gets rather slippy in the rain, especially the path that goes down into the valley." So we made our way all the way up that path, all the way across the site to the entrance. I rather stupidly stepped through. They have this sort of, to one side of the entrance building, a sort of a ratcheted access system, a bit like at a football ground. The gate that goes kick, 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 kick. Well, I went through the gate before it was clear that actually the entrance building was no longer open and people had gone home for the day. Now, the wind was starting to howl, the rain was coming in, and we're all accustomed to northeastern weather, we really are. But this was quite harsh and cold weather. And we thought, oh rats, well, obviously our friend can't get through this ratcheted gate system, and if the entrance building's closed, how's she going to get out? You see, there was another element here, and that is to say that she had driven us to the site because her car actually has the capacity to carry her wheelchair. So Mrs. Soup and my friend were on, our friend were on the other side of this gate, inside the site. I was on the side with the car park, and the rain was coming in, and we were aware that, oh rats, well, everything's going to close down any minute. So Mrs. Soup ran off back to the museum, about, say, I don't know, maybe quarter of a mile, if that, back to the museum, so down through the valley to let them know what was going on, because there's no mobile phone reception. I managed to get mobile phone reception and call the museum to sort of explain our predicament at around about the same time as Mrs. Soup arrived in the museum, and we were both effectively told, well, you've got 5 minutes and we're leaving. Okay. Our friend is stuck at the entrance. Can someone not go up and open the entrance building to let her out because her car's just there? Oh no! You've got 5 minutes and we're going to leave. We haven't got time to go back up to the entrance building and open that up. So, two things happened simultaneously. I was put in the unfortunate position of having to drive my friend's car illegally without insurance. About 1.5 miles from one car park to another, up to the military road that runs along the route of Hadrian's Wall, very undulating, rather bizarre road, especially if you're not driving a car that you're accustomed to, and then down a couple of tracks and things to the other car park. While that was happening, and obviously unbeknownst to me, Mrs. Soup and my friend were trying to navigate their way back through the site, down the valley, up to the museum within 5 minutes, despite it being suddenly incredibly slick. In fact, Mrs. Soup was properly furious, and traumatized is too strong a word, but she was scared but when next I saw her, because more than a couple of times they almost fell off the path into the ravine. Yes, there is a fence there, but it was a muddy, wet, rainy day. They could have slipped underneath that fence very easily. It's just a waist-high bollard kind of thing. And when I arrived in the car park, I parked up our friend's car and got out. And actually, even as I was driving up to the car park, I could see that Mrs. Soup was not happy. And Mrs. Soup, being the stout Northern Irish woman that she is, she was making her point known. Her arms were sort of, were waving, and she wasn't happy at all. And there was a young man, a couple of ladies, and an older lady as well, who were sort of attempting to essentially shut her up. And I say that not in a cynical way, but they were just going, please, essentially, what can we say to make you not be bothered so we can go home? That was basically their attitude. And I sort of walked over and I was going, what's going on here? Cars here. And the discussion was had that basically lots of assumptions were made. So they had assumed that we had been told that the front would close, so we had to get to the front 45 minutes before the whole site closed. Which I think is actually grossly unfair, to be honest, because why should our friend's access issues limit her time on site? But also as well, actually, to be honest, at 5:15, which was about 45 minutes before the whole site closed, we were having a cup of tea in the museum. We'd stopped in the cafeteria for a cup of tea. Why didn't someone sort of say, oh, by the way, it's going to close? No one did say that. So there was assumptions made there. Someone else assumed that we'd arranged to have the car brought round, again assuming that our friend, because she was in a wheelchair, wouldn't be the one who was driving. A whole load of very messy assumptions were made, and they sort of almost ruined a very nice visit, a very informative and very charming visit to a very lovely site. And this has stuck with me over the past couple of days. I'm not going to go on and on about it. I mean, yes, it wasn't a nice experience, but I'm not here to bash Vinderlander. I'm here to ask the question: what are our responsibilities as archaeologists, as museum curators, as people who help other people get access to heritage, whether that's through videos, through books, through going to museums, through going to archaeological digs that are ongoing, or in this case something halfway between the two, a museum and a dig that's ongoing. What is our responsibility in terms of providing access? Because there are two different arguments. Obviously, to an ongoing excavation, you can't necessarily be expected to guarantee access for everyone who wants it. And yet, there is very real legislation which asks everyone, actually, businesses and properties, to consider wheelchair access, for example, when it comes to these sites. Now, as I say, Vinderlander does have excellent wheelchair access, and I dare say all that needs to happen there is a change in protocols, i.e. either someone is reminded on entering that they need to be back before the entrance closes, or there's some sort of confirmation as to, well, what are your plans for getting off the site? There was no sort of tally. Yes, we have someone with a wheelchair on the site, we'll have to make sure that they're out before we close down. Nothing like that happened. And it just got me thinking, what are our responsibilities? Because as I say, the site you can't knock the site in terms of its information content, and strictly speaking in terms of access to the site. But when it came to leaving, that was frankly horrific. It was really, really horrible. And Mrs. Soup actually, even last night, just kept on getting to these horrible sort of slightly panicky moments. No, not panic, sorry, that's the wrong word. No, she was remembering like a flash of the panic that was happening, because as far as she was concerned, 5 minutes and we're gone. It's raining, it's windy, it's slippy, it's dangerous. She had a really intense adrenaline fueled end to that visit, when she really didn't have to. And it's not like Mrs. Soup is someone who gets flustered easily, but this has stuck with her, and I can't help but think that this is possibly a question that needs to be answered. What are our responsibilities? Should we actually be expected to provide access like this to all sites, or, and I think I'm on this side of the fence, or should sites actually be far more aware of their responsibilities when it comes to providing good access for everyone? When it comes to, again, I'm not talking about a dig in the middle of the Northumberland countryside, which isn't ever going to be a visitor centre, as it were. But in terms of an established museum especially, but also, say, urban excavations where people can come over and ask questions, should that be part of the planning which goes into, for example, an excavation plan? Or a research plan when it comes to, for example, an open air excavation in an urban environment, or certainly part of the overall running of these sites if they do become museums. The answer, I suspect, is yes, of course it should be our concern. But what exactly are our responsibilities, and how much should we rely on people to have a differing expectation when they come to a site for a visit? I certainly wasn't expecting that our friend would have to leave early, for example, and yet apparently that's standard practice for the site. So there you go, a bit of a story, certainly not as ranty or as angry as it could have been, so rest assured, I love Vinderlander, I really do, but I just thought it was an interesting issue, and I thought I'd raise that and see what you guys have to say. So please do comment below, leave your thoughts and suggestions. I would love to hear them, and hopefully together we'll sort of hash out the issues surrounding this, because yeah, it's an interesting one. Anyway, as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.